Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars video. So today's a rather sad one. On Sunday we lost a British acting legend, Terence Stamp, best known for his work on the Superman films as General Zod, but also well known for his roles in Billy Budd, The Collector and Far From the Madding Crowd. But from a Star Wars perspective, Terence played one of the most underrated and overlooked characters in the entire saga. He was Supreme Chancellor Valorum, the Chancellor before Palpatine in the Phantom Menace. He unfortunately passed away at the age of 87 on Sunday, one of the great English actors of his time. And so to pay tribute to him in a Star Wars way, because I'm a Star Wars channel, I want to look at the legacy of Chancellor Valorum and the crazy history of the character both on screen and behind the scenes. There are some wild stories from the making of the Phantom Menace, and we're also going to take a look at what happened to him in both canon and legends. After the Phantom Menace, he only appeared on screen once again, in the Clone Wars Season 6 episode The Lost One. But in comics, novels, and even a hidden reference in Andor Season 1, he's been mentioned more than you might think. So no more jibber jabber my dear friends, let's pay tribute to the amazing Terence Stamp and his fantastic character Finis Valorum. When Terence first started working on the Phantom Menace, just like the other creatives and actors working on the movie, he knew how excited fans were for the return of the franchise. A new era was dawning upon them. And in the same way there was a lot of chitter-chatter about Liam Neeson's character, Ewan McGregor's character, and speculation about them running rampant in magazines and online forums, fans did the same kind of thing to try and work out who Terence Stamp was going to be playing. There was anticipation, but also confusion. Valorum was a name that appeared in an early script for A New Hope. He was originally going to play a Sith, but even before fans knew the character he was going to be playing, there was this assumption that Terence Stamp was going to be a villain, just based on his other work. In my research for this video, I found out the common sentiment at the time was that he was going to be a Sith, either adjacent to or working with Palpatine. Oh boy, how they were mistaken. They hadn't guessed he was going to be the good guy politician, the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic, during a flourishing age of Jedi Knights, before the dark times that Obi-Wan spoke about. A politician who would soon be disgraced by bureaucracy. I thought Terence did a great job. He was certainly overshadowed by the likes of Ian McDiarmid, but the character was interesting, and he played the role as well as he could. But did you know, my friends, behind the scenes, Terence had the most awful experience working with George Lucas on Episode 1. It was one of the most horrendous experiences of his entire career, and he wasn't quiet about it. He eventually described the movie as boring, mostly because he was still angry about what happened on set, understandably so. In 2013, talking to Empire magazine about working on Star Wars, he said this: "I just didn't get on with George. We didn't get on at all. I didn't feel he was a director of actors. He was more interested in stuff and effects." And the major reason that Terence had a bad experience, and this is the story you'll hear time and again, is because of the day he had to fly across the world, Australia to the UK, for a brief bit of shooting. Impromptu, George said to him, "We need you to film a scene." So he hopped on a plane, the longest flight you can imagine, almost an entire day. So when he landed, that's when everything went south. It turns out he was only filming a couple of Senate scenes. He recalls that George was abrupt and extremely clinical about the entire thing. He was made to think he was going to be there for an entire sequence, but his part was very short, one that didn't warrant travelling across the world. And to make things worse, he was told he'd be filming his scenes with Natalie Portman as Queen Amidala in the Senate, but when he arrived, it just so happened to be her day off, and he had to deliver his lines to a piece of paper stuck to a post. But later he was able to joke about it, but he noted he just didn't get along with George. And every single person who's ever worked with George, whether it's people who love him like Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor, or those who've been more critical, they all agree that George is a very unique kind of creative. He knows what he wants. Even if it defies traditional cinema convention, even if it baffles big studios, he would do anything to make sure his vision is the one that's created. Sometimes, unfortunately, it means that he might see certain actors as assets, but I don't think it was ever personal. And years later, Terence Stamp was able to laugh about it. Someone else who noted this about him is Sir Alec Guinness, another actor who wasn't the biggest Star Wars fan, but acknowledged that on set, George had his quirks. It's just the way he was. Either you see through that and you go along with the process, or you don't. In the case of Terence Stamp, he did an amazing job, and I think he deserves so much better. And in case you're wondering why didn't he appear in episode 2 or 3, he didn't want to return. The experience left a very sour taste in his mouth, and he famously described the Phantom Menace as boring. Prior to episode 2, when he was asked if he'd ever come back, he noted they couldn't afford him again. But despite all of this, as Valorum, he delivered a real sense of dignity in his performance. A fantastic, legendary actor. and even if he wasn't the biggest fan of his character or his work, I certainly am, and I know plenty of Star Wars fans who loved his contribution. So now we move on to an in-universe question. What happened to Chancellor Valorum after his political fall, post-Battle of Naboo? Well, for one thing, he was perceived as a disgrace, even more so when Palpatine became Emperor. The propaganda put out against him and his family caused immense defamation of character, loss of prestige for House Valorum, and even loss of income. His transport company Valorum Shipping lost out to Eriadu Shipping. Now this is where there is a split in the timeline depending on if you follow Legends or Canon. In the original expanded universe, Valorum was killed by Palpatine in an orchestrated attack. Instead of staying away from politics, Valorum had been studying Palpatine from a distance and realized how dangerous he could be to the galaxy. So Valorum tried to warn Bail Organa, and his damning words condemned of the emergency powers granted to the Chancellor. He said this: "Do you really trust the tyrant you're creating will give them back to you when the crisis is over? Palpatine will give back nothing. No one who seeks power the way that he does will ever surrender it willingly. Palpatine will make sure that any individual or group that opposes him or is in his way is removed." And ironically, deeming him a nuisance, Sidious orchestrated Valorum's brutal death. He was killed just after the Battle of Jabim, when his freighter the Star of Iskin exploded on takeoff. And while the evil Darth Sidious was behind it, he forced the Separatists to take credit, which they did. Palpatine didn't stop there, he also went after Valorum's family. In canon, the sequence of events is pretty different, because Valorum doesn't have an official death. In the Clone Wars Season 6, we learn that Valorum maintained an estate on Coruscant following his chancellorship, and Yoda seeks him out. The Jedi are trying to solve the Sifo-Dyas mystery and the truth about the Jedi's disappearance. They still don't know about the conspiracy concocted by Dooku and Palpatine. Their investigation leads to an uncovering of a file that was sealed by Valorum's administration regarding events on Obadiah. Around the time of the Naboo crisis, there was almost a crime war beneath Coruscant's surface. This involved the Pike Syndicate. In order to stabilize the situation, Chancellor Valorum at the time reached out to Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas to try and prevent another war, and to calm the situation down. Valorum sent both Sifo-Dyas and his personal aide Silman to the planet of Obadiah. After the negotiation, after the two left, the Pikes who'd been hired by Lord Tyrannus, Count Dooku, shot down Sifo-Dyas' ship. Valorum and the Jedi were left believing that the pair had been killed on Felucia, but that wasn't true. So following his conversation with Yoda in the Clone Wars Season 6, what happened to Valorum? All we know is that he removed himself from public life. Rumors started spreading about him, and he went down in history as an ineffective leader. And did you know, my friends, according to the episode guides for Narkina 5 and Announcement, both from Season 1, the name Valorum is murmured by guests at Mon Mothma's parties. And just to debunk any irresponsible speculation, Valorum is not Tay Kolma. They're two separate characters, who just so happen to look alike. So I guess it's up to the imagination what happened to him after this. Is Lucasfilm going to explore him in more depth with a recast, or maybe in another book someday? He's also mentioned a couple of times in The Mask of Fear, but only in retrospect. But otherwise it's pretty open-ended. Terence Stamp will be missed. He did an awesome job in The Phantom Menace. He didn't voice the character in the Clone Wars, that was Ian Ruskin, but he's certainly overlooked, and I hope in this video I did him and his character justice.